you are accepted. That's grace. And because of that, you can swim out of that. So now, instead of thinking of acceptance as the banner at the end, think of it as the platform that you're standing on. C.S. Lewis, whose nickname was Jack. I don't know how you go from C.S. to Jack, but that's what his friends called him. He was walking down the halls at Oxford one day, and there was a little colloquium of professors, very secular professors at Oxford that were in a room, and they were brainstorming about religions and world religions and what they all had in common. And they had on the chalkboard were 40, 50 different words that they thought all the religions had in common. And they saw, C.S. Lewis walking by, and they're like, Jack, come in here for a minute. And they said, okay, you're a Christian. Would you please tell us what Christians believe that could not possibly be already represented up here by these words that all world religions have in common? And C.S. Lewis walks up, reads the words, skims through them. He goes, oh, easy. He goes, you missed the easiest one. And he just took his chalk and wrote the word grace over all of them. And he said, and then he, dropped the chalk and walk out. And then, probably two lessons you learn from that is, one is don't ever try to outsmart C.S. Lewis, right? But the second one is that what distinguishes the gospel message from every other religious message in the world is that it is a gift that God gives that you receive by grace. Every other religion in the world works according to the premise, I obey, therefore I'll be accepted. If I obey well enough, often enough, if it's, if I'm righteous enough, I'll be accepted. The gospel flips that and says, no, you're accepted. You're accepted because of an act of grace. Therefore, in response to that, you obey.
I remember giving my life to Jesus. Didn't grow up in a Christian home, but I remember the first time I read Ephesians 2:8-9. For by grace you have been saved through faith, and it's not of yourself. It's a gift from God. And I remember putting down my Bible because I didn't know how to get to heaven. So when I read it's not as a result of works that anybody can boast or talk about it, it's just grace, that blew my mind as a little 16-year-old. How is this true? Now let me ask you guys this. What does that look like in your family? 4 kids and a marriage. Talk about grace.
So we'll have two different answers. I'm gonna give a more of a
theological?
Yeah. And I actually used this in church yesterday. I was talking about our identity in Christ and how Satan, our enemy, when he attacks us, the first thing he goes after is our identity. To Jesus in the temptation, he says, if you really are the Son of God, which is ironic because that's what the Father had just declared over Jesus. You're my beloved Son. And that's what Satan does with our kids too. And I said, it's almost like, imagine a swimmer who's about to swim. And as he's standing on the platform waiting for the gun to go off, at the finish line, there's a banner that says acceptance, worth, value. And our kids grow up in a culture where that starting gun goes off and they are thrashing with all their might because they believe that unless they get there first, unless they're smart enough, pretty enough, athletic enough, that they're not going to have acceptance. And so their whole life is a quest toward acceptance. Well, what the gospel does is it flips it and says, no, you are accepted. That's grace. And because of that, you can swim out of that. So now, instead of thinking of acceptance as the banner at the end, think of it as the platform that you're standing on. And I'm no longer, in this race of life. I'm not sending my kids out in this race of life in order to earn the love and acceptance of God. I'm sending them out because they have it. And they say, whatever else happens, whether you succeed or fail, whether you're the most popular or you're not, you have the absolute approval of the only one whose opinion really matters.
Wow.
And in a day when we've got, I shared some of these stats yesterday, 91% of teenagers, 91 report anxiety issues.
91%.
91%. In the last 15 years, the number of girls who say that they are persistently sad and hopeless, in the last 15 years, that number has gone from 10% to 57%. And that kind of day, that's all coming out of this search for identity.
Yeah.
And grace is the answer to that endless striving of got to be pretty enough, smart enough, successful enough. And that's where I think grace matters.
Yeah, that's good. I love the illustration. It'd be a little bit better if it was a football illustration, but swimming works. No, what a great picture that really is.